All right. So as we said earlier, Trent and I were talking about, we know that this is a very difficult time as people are trying to figure out what they're doing as far as their tournaments are concerned, and to try to release some of the apprehension about looking at virtual tournaments. We talked about, let's host a webinar and let's get people together and let people talk to people who are far smarter than the two of us about how all of these platforms work for both synchronous and asynchronous tournaments. For those of you who missed the earlier webinar on synchronous tournaments, those will be available on the Hofstra University YouTube page, and we will send out the links to both that one as well as this session on the IEL, as well as anyone who registered will be granted links to those. So this afternoon for our last sessions, we're going to talk about asynchronous tournaments. And we do have Ben Stewart who is going to lead the discussion, but Steve from Yaatly has also stayed on the call, as well as Danny Cantrell has stayed on from ForensicsTournament.net. So they'll be, for the open forum, we can ask questions of any of them. But I do want to turn it over to Ben Stewart so he can talk about asynchronous tournaments.
Okay, thanks, Tamika. And once again, thanks to Trent and Tamika for putting together what's a really useful session today, and from a lot of different perspectives. And we've got a lot of different folks with a lot of different viewpoints from many communities in the call. And I think that this is a really valuable start to, as Tamika said, easing some minds. You know, I want to state on the record that actually I'm feeling pretty confident about the fall. And my goal in the next month or so is going to be to try and really convey that confidence to people, because I think we're going to be okay as much as we can be. I don't think this situation with regard to not being in person is what really any of us want, but there are definitely solutions to keep things going, at least as best we can from a forensics perspective. And one of those, and it's already been tried on Speechwire, it's already been tried, I know, on ForensicsTournament.net, is, and other platforms too, is asynchronous competition. So unlike synchronous competition, where you have students performing in front of a camera in a live round in front of a judge, with asynchronous competition, it's a video that has been submitted in some form or another, and the judges view those video performances by each student, and then rank the round as they would in a live round. But in this case, they are performances that have been recorded and are going to be the same generally for each round. And then at the end, some of the performances will generally move on to a final. And then in the final, the judges will once again review the performances and rank and assign points accordingly. I will probably defer to Danny at the end of this to talk a little bit about his experience, because as I recall, he's done this as well. But I'll show you what this looks like in Speechwire if you're going to administer an asynchronous tournament. So let's put that up here. And like I said earlier, if I'm still showing up super small and for some reason you actually want me to be bigger on your screen, right click my video and click pin video, and that will make my video much larger so you can hopefully see the details on my screen. As I mentioned earlier, if you go to the control panel and then click e-balloting settings in the Speechwire command interface, there's now an option to select what platform you want to run your tournament on, and asynchronous is one of those options. Once you set that and you've gone ahead and you've set up registration, and since I'm only going to talk about this for about 5-10 minutes, I don't want to go through the entire process of setting up the tournament itself. That's something that I'm happy to help people with separately if they have questions about setting up Speechwire from the very beginning. But if you've already set up your tournament and you've opened registration, I'll go ahead over to the registration area here. If I click on, let me put this here so that I can monitor. If you click on a tournament, so I'm going to click on Test Tournament Asynchronous, and I'm going to click on Update Your Entries. This is going to look very much like the normal entry page, because it is, and you just put in the entries for your team in each event. And once you've done that, there's a button on the registration interface that says Video Links. So you just click on that button, and then you can put in the YouTube or what have you video address for each of your entries. I have always encouraged coaches to encourage their students to upload asynchronous video performances as unlisted performances on YouTube, if that's the platform that you're going to be using. This keeps them out of the YouTube search engine and makes it so that only people who have the URL are going to be able to see the performance. I think that if it's an original oratory that a student has no problem having the world see, that doesn't really matter. They could make it public and it's completely fine, really. I don't know how much of a copyright risk having performances that are interpretations of authors' works online is. I certainly encourage people to hew on the side of caution when it comes to copyright. And I think while I'm not a lawyer and I have no business disclosing legal advice, trying to limit the audience to the maximum degree possible while still performing the educational purpose of the tournament is at least an argument in one's favor. So if the link is unlisted, then at the very least, we've done what we can to try and restrict that so that only the judge who needs to see the performance is seeing the performance so that they can convey their comments and also make their rankings and their points. So I'm now going to go, let's say that I've put in my links, I've saved them. We're going to schedule our tournament. We're advancing now from registration onto the actual tournament itself. I should mention, let's say that for whatever reason, someone emails a video link to a manager. They also have the ability to change video links for performances, so they can make those on the manager's side too. I'm gonna go ahead and schedule my tournament. I have no idea what event I entered everyone in. It was not gonna tell me on that page either. It looks like it was CA. Okay, so we'll go ahead and we're going to schedule CA, schedule. Yes, this is the normal scheduling process that we also went through twice earlier. So it's just the same as it would be normally. In here now, we have me judging these 5 students. And we have no room because there is no room. You don't need to set the room for this approach. Now I'm going to go to the posting center. I'm going to release my e-ballots for CA. There we go. And now I'll go into my judging account and there it is. So there's my asynchronous round that has just popped up in my judging account. I will click on that. Once again, I have a prompt here to click here to start the round. I should note that if this is the first round that a judge is judging, the system will force them to put in their cell phone number so that if there is a problem with their ballot, we make sure that the manager and or their tab staff have a way to contact that judge, and in addition to their email, which of course is on file because we collect that during registration too. That's how we determine that they have an account, and it's also how the manager can click a button to link them and have Speechwire send them a password so they can get set up as well. It was mentioned in the last session that it's not preferable to have the judges create their own accounts. It's preferable to have the manager click those link buttons because otherwise we end up with a lot of possibly duplicate accounts on the website, and also it's an extra process that people who may not be familiar with Speechwire, because this might be the first time they're judging on the platform, we don't force them to go and create an account for themselves. The first interaction they'll have is a welcome email that gives them instructional steps about how to proceed. So I'm in my judge account. I'm going to say click here to start the round. All good. And if I'm ready to watch my first performance, you click edit comments for that performance and you get a big old link that says click here to play the video for this entry. So I'll go ahead and click that. And it's going to open the performance, which is Rickroll. So probably not going to win the round with that video, but that gives you an idea of what we're dealing with. So each of the performances will have a video link. You just watch those video links. You make your comments here. You can type in the performance length if you want to, and then you can save your comments. Once you've done that, we have our e-ballot with our ranks, 1 through 5, with our points, which I think are using the AFA model, so 1 through 25 here. And you can put all that stuff in and click Save Ballot. Once you've done that, oh, and you can also see who's double entered too, although that's more useful for synchronous. That's not very useful for asynchronous. Once you've put all the ranks and points in, you actually can still make changes to your comments. So you can rank the round, put the points in for the round, and then if you remember a comment that you wanted to give to a performance after that, you can go ahead back in and add those additional comments, although you will not be allowed to change your ranks or change your points. That is kind of the extent of it with regard to asynchronous. It's fairly easy to administer. I'll make a couple comments about the structure of asynchronous tournaments. Bring myself up here again. With regard to the structure of the asynchronous tournament, unlike a synchronous tournament, you're not necessarily tied to any one schedule. So if you wanted to, let's say that you're having 2 preliminary rounds with a single judge in each one. You could schedule those and release them, say, on Thursday, and you could say that you have until Saturday to complete judging, and you could let the judges judge those rounds whenever they wanted to. So that's definitely an option that's available to you. I have received from one manager, they really wanted the students to be able to see the performances that were in their sections as if they were taking part in a real tournament. And again, you know, you're thinking about what's the minimum level of people seeing a performance? What's the minimum audience that replicates the tournament experience and still performs that educational purpose? And so I created a feature for that one tournament in their coach accounts. Coaches would be able to go on and get a unique link, again, with a very long gibberish string at the end of the URL that they could send to each of their students that would then bring up just the videos that were in their sections. So if they wanted to watch the other performances that they quote unquote competed against, they could do that. I've had other asynchronous tournaments that have been totally okay with just having the judges watch the performances. So, you know, it's something I'm willing to offer, but it's at the behest of the tournament manager. It's not something that I just put out there. Also, now that I'm adding student accounts, I can make that available in the student account if I wanted to, where it wouldn't be something that a coach has to email out anymore. The student could just go into their coach or their student account and see those links. That's something that I plan to add and have be an option for managers who opt to take the asynchronous approach as well. I think there may have been one other thing that I wanted to mention really quickly about the asynchronous approach. Oh, I mentioned hybrid approaches earlier, where you might say run your prelims on the 8x8 platform and then switch to the Zoom platform for finals. Probably if you're using the Yaatly platform, you're just going to use the Yaatly platform. So I think you'd just be on that one in that case. I've had it proposed to me, and it's certainly possible that you could choose to do the asynchronous approach for your prelims and then maybe switch to some sort of synchronous approach for your finals. I've had some tournament managers request that. I think it was more at the high school level. I'm not sure how much interest there would be in that kind of a hybrid approach with asynchronous for part of the tournament and then synchronous for another part of the tournament. In the collegiate level, it also brings up to me some interesting questions and discussions about whether it's an apples to oranges comparison. So you're comparing what amounts to a recorded video to determine who gets to the live round, which is almost a completely different presentation and is reliant much more on technology and whether you have the technology to perform in front of a camera for a live judge. So, you know, that's a discussion that's beyond my pay grade. I'm not going to make those determinations, but I think it's something that's important to talk about. And I think that in conclusion, before I take some questions on this approach and we get to our, and actually I want to throw to Danny. I forgot about that. I want to throw to Danny to get his experience with asynchronous competition as well. Where I'm at right now with regard to this fall is kind of a throw everything at the wall and see what sticks, but also try to make it relatively painless for managers, no matter which approach they choose to take. So I'm trying to empower people to do as many things as possible. Asynchronous tournaments, definitely one of those things. But as has been mentioned by others on the call, I think that we'll find the balance. We'll work that out. And when I say we, it's more of you guys. You all will work that out, and we'll see what people prefer. We'll see what each community prefers. In the same way that some communities prefer ForensicsTournament.net, and some communities prefer Speechwire, and some communities prefer Tab Room. I think that the same thing might happen with video platforms, where some communities determine that their preferred video platform is one thing and others determine it's another. And there might also be arguments to be made that there is a value to having the asynchronous tournament experience in addition to the synchronous tournament experience. And some students might be able to participate more easily with one approach, and some students might be able to participate more easily with another. So I'm excited to see where this goes. I think there's arguments to be made that there's benefits to everything, and I think that this community is filled with brilliant people who will determine those things, and we'll see how it transpires. And I'll throw it to Danny now for some more comments.
So we just had one asynchronous tournament. Jared talked about it a little bit at the NDC, so if you were there, you listened to him. But the solution we came up with, I can show you real quickly. Oh, can I get screen sharing, or is that not possible? But essentially for the...
You should have it now.
Okay, perfect. So for the Proto Communication tournament, what we ended up doing was they wanted to sort of have a bit more control over the videos. So we created the schematics, and then with a lot of work, they went through and created YouTube playlists with, like, so this was round 1, ADS section 1, and here were the 6 students who were assigned to that section. And they created a playlist. And then what we did is, again, this was, thrown together. There's probably better ways to do it. But what we did is for the rooms, we just made those rooms have the YouTube playlist on them. And so this ADS section 1, there's a lot of rooms to enter and copy paste and everything, but worked out pretty well, where this is the round 1 ADS section 1. Here's the round 2 ADS section 1. And that had the different playlist with those students who were in that section. And then the e-ballots, instead of having the link that went to the 8x8 video room, it just had this link. So then you would just like the same thing that Ben just showed, you would click on this link, it would take you to this playlist, you hit play all, and then you can watch the performances in order. And that seemed to work out pretty well. It was pretty labor intensive ahead of time. I know Jared wanted to normalize everything a little bit, so everybody's video started with a code. They chopped the intro conclusion out of it when people went to go up to their camera to turn it off. So he did a lot of work setting this all up, but that was how they ended up doing it. And then I believe it was something like the entries were due by April 19th, I think. Yeah, and then the judging period was from April 23rd through May 1st. And then the award ceremony, I thought one thing they did with the asynchronous was the award ceremony wasn't for another week. And that gave some time to any judges who didn't actually judge the rounds, gave them some time to get those judged. And also, if you watched his award ceremony, he invited the students who won into the stream, and they got to talk a little about their event. So he got to set all that up ahead of time as well. So there are some very interesting options with asynchronous where you have a lot more time with the schedule. For the limited preparation, what they did was they released the topics 6 p.m. on April 18th, and then the students had 24 hours to prepare, record, and submit the videos for those events. So it's a little bit different than traditional tournaments, but of course we have to adapt to this world. So that was how we handled the asynchronous. Yeah.
All right, so we have some questions in the chat. The first is from John Conway. Does it open the video in a separate tab, or does it take the comments box away to watch the video? And I guess this is on either platform.
Yeah, so I'll start with that. Right now, it does open it in a separate tab, but I could certainly embed it. That wouldn't be a problem. I think embedding it would limit it to YouTube at that point, because I would just write it as a YouTube embed. So at that point, I would probably be doing something like collecting the code at the end of the YouTube video, or just writing some code that'll extract it from the URL that's submitted, because I could do that relatively easily too. And then it could be embedded. I've tried to be kind of agnostic in everything, I guess, but also with regard to how people might want to view it. So I like having it pop out in a separate tab and or window that someone can then just full screen or drag halfway, so that it's half the screen and the comments box is the other half of the screen, like tile the two windows. I kind of just like to give people that choice. But that being said, I don't see a reason why it couldn't be embedded also.
Yeah, we just had it pop out into a new window as well. It's pretty easy.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll embed it. I might stick with what I have right now, but I'm definitely going to think it over. I think there are options for like tiling though that you can get like a similar type effect.
All right, so the next question is from Justin, and I believe this is for you, Ben. If we have participants use and submit unlisted YouTube videos, is it possible to embed the video with playback ability right in that e-ballot so they could view the video box next to the comment box on the same page? I don't know how easy it is to convert a link to embed code.
Yeah, so I think I touched on that a little bit there, and I think that it's something I'm going to think over. It's certainly practical, but for now, the option of just dragging the tab over to the side of the screen and having it be half the screen and then having the e-ballot be half the screen will give you a similar type effect. But I'll absolutely keep it under advisement.
I believe that both you and Danny touched on this already, but just in case. Question from Anthony McMullen. Is it possible to have a hybrid tournament, for example, i.e. events synchronous and debate events synchronous, i.e. asynchronous and debate synchronous?
Yeah, I do plan to offer that. I actually, in the chat, I mentioned that I just sort of had that crop up in my head. It should have cropped up in my head before that, honestly. But it was just a few days ago that I was having a conversation with someone and realized, there are for sure going to be tournaments, at least in the high school circuit in Illinois, that are going to want to, at least at the start of the year, say, we're going to go asynchronous for everything except extemp and radio and maybe impromptu, and we're going to go synchronous with those 3 events because we think we have to in order to make the tournament experience the way we want. Those have got to be synchronous even while we're still dipping our toes in the water and trying to figure out what we're doing here. So I want to provide that. My plan is to say that you'll have a page where you can pick for each round of each event which approach you want to use. And I hope people don't do something like we're going to do 3 events on Yaatly, and we're going to do 3 events on 8x8, and we're going to do 3 events asynchronous. It's like, okay, there are configurations that make sense. Like we're going to do all of the speech asynchronous, and we're going to do all of debate on some synchronous platform, be it Yaatly, be it 8x8, be it Zoom. That's something I definitely want to support, and I definitely plan to.
And then, yeah, it was just a setting if you want to use the live video rooms or not. If you wanted to do it like the Proto Communications did, you just have to create those rooms for the asynchronous events and then assign those rooms to those events, etc. I think it'd be a lot of work. prepare for a long week.
So we have a question which both of you kind of touched on a little bit, but to also just put it into the live stream. How does extemp and impromptu work in the asynchronous model?
It's not like extemp and impromptu, live, that's for sure. Danny, what do you think about that? I mean, it's very different.
Yeah, it's just a different sort of almost event. The Proto Communications Tournament released them to the students with 24 hours of prep. And they just had the one speech and just got judged 5 times. It's a tough nut to crack.
I've had some operate like on the honor system, more or less, where it's basically, we're going to give you this topic and we hope that you don't cheat extensively, and then at the end upload your performance, and there you go. So I mean, it's an event. I mean, that's what I feel about every implementation of every forensics event online with every different platform. Is at the end of the day, what you have is a competition event. It's just, how much does it look like its original version in person? It varies. And certainly that's the sort of mail-in extemp is a very different event than in-person extemp.
I did judge the impromptu for the Proto Communications Asynchronous Tournament, and it felt like a normal round. It really wasn't any different. They had 24 hours, but it was, same comments I normally write, I wrote, so.
I don't see any more questions in the chat, but if people have questions, feel free to just ask either Danny or Ben. And Steve is also still hanging out, who has made some suggestions about Flipgrid and other things for asynchronous debate events. All right, seeing none, I'll turn it over to Trent for our open forum.
So I just wanted to wrap this up with an open forum where anybody could sort of ask any sort of general tournament administration questions that were covered today, and or weren't covered that you just want to put out there, or if you just want to bring up some issues that you think the community at large needs to think about as we venture into this newish territory. And also it can include anything from, if anybody out there is hosting a tournament and they want to make a tournament announcement to people, you can do that as well. I just wanted to give everybody sort of an opportunity. I had obviously an agenda for this tutorial or webinar, but I know that it also brings up a whole host of questions for other aspects of what we do. So I wanted to sort of provide at least a space where we can sort of discuss these sort of things, or at least get the questions out there. So there's a question from David Bailey, and he would like to know Ben and Danny's thoughts about using 8x8 to support the interviewing as an event.
I'll defer to Danny on that. First off, since I'm not a instructor, I think he'd be a better source.
I mean, 8x8 is just like Zoom, right? It's the same feature set we're using right now, and so I don't see why it wouldn't work fine. Again, there's not the breakout rooms. I'm not too familiar with interviewing, but you might need like the different rooms for that event. I'm not sure. You can screen share, so if you wanted to show a resume or something like that, you could screen share with an 8x8. Again, you can go ahead and try it out if you want to see kind of what it looks like. Just go x8.bc/David Bailey test room, and now you're in a 8x8 room, and you can kind of see what it looks like. Yeah, I don't think we've done interviewing at any tournaments we've hosted, so I'm not quite sure what I can tell you.
Yeah, it seemed pretty intuitive, just in terms of it seems very similar to Zoom, but I've never actually used it, so that's why I ask.
Again,
okay.
we've used it about 20 tournaments, and all the way from elementary to high school to college, and people get it. It's pretty intuitive. Sometimes I think simple's better, right? So like, I know when I first started using Zoom, I was like, what is going on? But 8x8, you just click the URL and you're there, and you just start talking. So,
thank you.
Jonathan Conway puts in the chat that asks if anyone has thought about sharing judge pools, right? An example would be 2 tournaments happening on the same weekend, and when finals comes out, drawing on each other's judge pools to have more clean and more varied judge pools. Something to think about. Definitely something to think about, I think. Sure.
I know there's some people on the call who judged at some of the tournaments. I find it completely exhausting. So I don't know if I'd want to judge 2 tournaments in one weekend, but potentially, right? I guess you could like cross halfway through the day. That's an interesting idea.
And I'll offer a little clarification on kind of where I was going with that. Is, I see Tamika on my screen, right? I have a graduate assistant that's one of her former students, right? And so maybe even just like, all right, my graduate student goes and judges at the Snafu where she's mostly clean, and one of her graduate students comes and judges at whatever Florida tournament where they're almost entirely clean. And so that might, again, weekend to weekend, get different views. We're very geographically isolated in Florida, and so students get a lot of the same judges over and over. So I'm always looking for ways to mix it up.
I think that's a great idea and something that we should certainly talk about, especially if tournaments are happening in the same weekend, and that we all know each other. So discussing that, I think that that's a good idea to get some of that regional variation too for our students if they're not competing outside of regions. There's a lot that just happened in the chat, so I'm gonna let Trent cover some of it.
Okay, I think we have like a couple of a tournament announcement. I know David Trumbull from St. Anselm's College is hosting the Jack Lynch Invitational, which is always the first weekend in November. But he asked, how much advance time will people have before they make their final decisions as to which platform to use, and giving people the full tournament details. So yeah, I guess it's about I guess maybe recommendations for how much leeway or lead time we need to give to schools and that are coming to the tournament. I'll let Ben and Danny and maybe Steve comment on this. I'll just say from the test run tournament that we did for our district in May, I think Brandon Johnson, who's the director of speech at Cornell University, I think he gave us I want to say he gave us a week where he sent out the Yaatly links and all that kind of stuff. I think that gave us a week because we all weren't familiar with it. And then he gave a wonderful sort of step-by-step email about how to register your organization on Yaatly, how to send it out to your competitors and your judges, and they would have to accept all that kind of stuff. And that took a little bit of time. So I'm imagining that, in August or early September before the season starts, I'm imagining that that's probably when you're going to want to have, you want to get a lot of that administrative stuff done as much as you possibly can. Of course, if you already know you have competitors coming back, you can get them started earlier on it. But as you gain more people on your team, you'll want to take them through the process, I think, pretty early on to give people time to get things set up. I don't know if anybody else wants to say anything else about that.
So the only thoughts I would have is I do think it helps to have practices on whatever platform you're going to use. So if you're using 8x8, we did as sort of a beta testing the software, these minute to win it tournaments on like Wednesday nights where everybody had a minute to talk and that was it. And it was just more about just seeing if anything was, finding the bugs. And I did find for the festival, the people who participated in that minute to win it series did better at the festival because they sort of figured out how this all works and they got to try their technology ahead of time. And so I would definitely recommend doing practice rounds and test tournaments just so you can check internet speed at the very least. It really does make a difference. And there's certainly best practices out there. I know like connecting Ethernet cords are better sometimes than Wi-Fi, or making sure your family's not on Netflix while you're competing, stuff like that. And so ironing out those things ahead of time, I think would be the real benefit. I've done various video conferencing for the last few months, as I'm sure we all have for class and things. And it really has seemed like, to me, it comes down to your home internet speed. It doesn't matter if you're using Zoom or 8x8 or anything. It's if your home internet is slow, you're going to have a bad experience. If your home internet's fast, it's going to be great. So I think those are the types of concerns you want to do is don't wait until Saturday morning to share with everybody, okay, here's how you're going to do it. Go on Zoom. And someone doesn't have Zoom downloaded, it's going to be a delay and cause problems. Or if they don't understand the idea with 8x8, you just click the URL. Don't download any software. Don't do anything like that. It can be confusing. So the more you practice on the platform, the easier it will be.
Yeah, and just to jump on that and to add to that, one of the things we recommend on Yaatly is that people schedule a round zero. And this is primarily for debate tournaments, but could work with an IE tournament as well. And the round zero is just a half-hour round during which people are sent to a mock set of rooms, whether they're in an IE posting or IE schematic or a debate posting, doesn't really matter. But it just gives them a chance to practice like finding where they're going to be and how to get into a room, how to turn their cam and their mic on, how to take turns, how the judges, and we found that round zero solves a lot of problems and gets things moving a little more quickly. One thing about Yaatly is that when you do create an event, an event for which you're going to be charged, you also get a demo period before that event that is free. And so you can send out a link in advance of your tournament And anybody who registers for that event via Yaatly will have an opportunity to get onto your very site and to try their camera, to try their mic, to have up to 10 minutes of video for free before you get charged. So that is wrapped up into any paid event that you host on Yaatly.
Okay. I wanted to, I know that Shannon LeBeau is on this call and she has a lot of legal expertise, and I wanted her to pop in real quick to give her thoughts about some potential challenges with asynchronous.
Hi, I will start with I am not barred in whatever state you're in, right? For those of you with a JD, this is just some friendly FYI, and I would really like this to spread a little further because I think there's a lot of questions about copyright issues. And the first thing is that copyright has to be enforced with the people who have the copyright, right? So I think that there's this thought process that someone's gonna swoop in and then suddenly like knock all our kids off of things or sue us all for billions of dollars. But it would have to be by the artist who created whatever that information is. The second is because we're doing this for educational purposes, the one thing I would suggest is that people don't start selling student work. Student ownership is integral, and a tournament does not automatically have ownership of things that they're showing, right? So whether synchronous or asynchronous, the information would still belong to us. Just like if we're lecturing, I know we have a lot of lecturers on this call, and I know that you're worried about that. If the university will only own those things if in our agreement with the university that we signed for a contract, it says that we turn those things over. Otherwise, our lectures are automatically copywritten as our own intellectual property on the day that we state those lectures. And the same thing kind of trickles down to speech. The warning as coaches I would give you is they look at copyright as to what is changed. Just like an artist can perform a cover of another artist's song, but it has to be substantially different enough. So like Blake Shelton could get away doing like an Usher cover, right? Because they're totally different genres. Things like POI, things that are like poetry cuts, things that take a long movie and they bust it into 9 minutes and 40 seconds as a duo, those are probably going to be seen as substantial enough education changes where it doesn't threaten the original work. Where you're going to run into problems is where people take a short story and perform almost the whole short story, or where people may take a monologue and the monologue is originally only 15 minutes and they perform 9 minutes and 40 seconds of the 15 minutes, or they take another artist's poetry and they perform it in totality at once. And that's the part that gets put online because that's taking YouTube likes away from the original artist, and that could be seen as taking away income. But as long as we still keep cutting, as long as we still keep doing creative things and we're not just mimicking artists' work and we're not selling other artists' work, then we should be okay in educational forum with the small amount that we do, okay? So if y'all could spread this copyright word, because it's kind of getting thrown around a little bit, kind of like, what do you call it when they say woo things and everybody gets scared, you know? like I think that's how a lot of the copyright is, you know the word I'm looking for, Tamika, what is that word?
I don't actually know what word you're thinking at this moment.
The politicians say roll the die, you know what I mean? Like I think that's how like the copyright kind of ideology is being used. And in reality, as long as we don't start to try to use this as a format to make money, as long as we keep it educational, as long as we're not trying to take anybody's work, then we should be all right.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that insight. Definitely. I know that when we talk about copyright, it's a very ominous concept. And maybe that's what makes it a little spooky. I don't know if that's the word you were trying to come up with, but like, that's kind of how I feel whenever people start talking about it. There's a comment in here that I wanted to get to from Brian Swafford, of course, where he says about the concern that virtual and online tournaments either synchronous or asynchronous will be used by administrations as a justification to cut back budgets, since you can do tournaments without having the cost of travel, lodging, meals, etc. You know, how, you know, meaning that we can't safely travel right now, but, you know, looking forward beyond this to, you know, next semester or next year, we do, as I think a community, should be talking about how we make those cases to administrations that this is a temporary sort of thing. The first thing I said when we went up for our budget review this year was that I was like, listen, I still have to pay entry fees and judge fees. And I imagine because of the nature of the work, they're going to be substantially higher than they normally are. So whereas I'm used to paying, you know, maybe $10 for an uncovered slot, maybe tournaments are going to start charging me $25 for uncovered slot. And I think that that's justified based on that. So I said, what I need to do is I need to shift my travel budget to cover my entry fees. And my college was willing to do that. But it's definitely something that we need to talk about. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on that.
And we talked about this a little bit during the National Developmental Conference that was hosted by the four families. So AFA, NFA, PKD, and PhiRo-Pi. We did have this conversation a little bit about how to continue justifying our programs and stuff, because we do know that not just because of this, there's lots of reasons why a lot of programs are on the chopping block. And this can certainly make a reason for budget cuts and stuff. But I think, as Trent pointed out, and as a lot of us talked about within that forum, is that there are ways in which to continue justifying the existence of your program. And there are ways in which you talk about, you know, this is what we're doing in this moment. Because until we have vaccines and stuff, some universities, even if tournaments do go back in person, I foresee some universities saying you absolutely cannot travel until there are vaccines and stuff. So we do need to be mindful of where we are in this moment, but also thinking to, this is a moment for us to be creative and innovative, but also recognizing that there are some values and different skills for in-person, and that's really all. And a lot of us argumentation and we're communication professionals. We know how to make the arguments about how both and you know, having those things, as long as we don't get so stuck in like we have to go back to this model. I think that there are ways we can make those arguments.
Well, and I've wondered before if now might also be a good opportunity for us to expand forensics, especially in these trying times, where we can either experiment with the ways in which we do performance. So one idea that I had was maybe pick a topic for a month and say, we're going to have a festival that could be synchronous, asynchronous, doesn't matter. We're going to give you a topic. So policing in America. And you can do speeches, extemporaneous presentations, impromptu presentations, inter-performances, something around a topic, and do that. And so then you can say, it's like forensics, it's not what we normally do, but we can't get together to do what we normally do. Another option would be to provide exemplars, where we say, for this tournament, we're going to only focus on, say, 2 or 3 events, where we can use it as a teaching opportunity to get together and show things. And the other thing is, for the history of forensics in America, most of it was not traveling to other universities and competing. Most of it was done on our campuses or as scrimmages with one other school. And so, you know, it's easy to say this is the way we've always done it, except for it's not the way we've always done it. And so I've kind of been thinking about how can we do forensics differently to make ourselves valuable to our institutions, so that when budget conversations are coming up, we can both say those costs are still there, as Trent pointed out, but also say we're also value added to the university by providing opportunities, forums, skills that are valuable to our home institution as well as our students as they compete.
Okay. All right. I see some other things here in the chat, but they're kind of getting answered. Randy had a question about the best practices from the NFA and AFA. I think both Kelly and John told us that they were planning on having those meetings next week. So we anticipate that that will happen after those meetings happen.
I mean, the same thing for FiroPi and PKD, all of in PDA, IPDA, like all of the orgs are meeting in the next few weeks. So expect some information from all of those organizations, because everybody is meeting virtually, but also we're also trying to figure out as things are constantly evolving as orgs. So all of those things are going to be coming out. I would project at the beginning of August, we'll start to see a lot more information coming from all of the organizations.
In the meantime, though, I have already been sort of developing my own version of how to do online tournament prep for my students, as well as my coaches and judges. That will be an internal thing. I'm just working on it, but I'm happy to share that with anybody. I'm probably going to be creating like a Google Doc that just gives sort of a basic outline of what to do, because all of this is so new, and I just, I just, for my sanity and for my student sanity, I just want to be able to give them a document that says, okay, here's what I need you to do first. First of all, I need you to acquire the technology. Make sure you have a laptop that works. Make sure you have access to Google Chrome. Go ahead and make sure that you know how to get to Yaatly and Speechwire or ForensicsTournament.net. That's the number one. Then everything from like scouting your performance spaces. Like I'm telling my students now, go ahead. If you're going to be at home, start scouting your performance spaces now. Like start looking at where in your home or where, where you can perform, where you can have some sense of privacy, and experiment with lighting and all that kind of stuff, and sound and acoustics and all that kind of stuff. Start doing that stuff now. And then, once the school year starts, we'll activate accounts. I'll start sending out that information to my students and, letting them know, hey, I need you to sign up for this, that, and the third, and then you should be good to go. And then we start obviously virtual practices and run-throughs of events, so we see what they look like. And then, a couple of days before the tournament, we do last-minute checks to make sure that we have stability in terms of internet and stuff like that. And that's pretty much like what I would be, putting together for my students, and also for, my judges and my coaches, as a way to just sort of get them ready to do this for however long we have to do it that way. And I know that different parts of the country are doing different things in terms of opening or reopening. And without even getting into that madness, a lot of people will have different options. And I'm hoping that whenever those best practices comes out, that there is something in there for coaches and judges to be aware that not every student is going to have the same accessibility to space and those sorts of things that other students will have. And I really, really hope that judges are going to be taking that stuff into consideration. That's what my hope is, that you literally may have a student who lives in a house and has access to a study, and you're going to have some students doing their persuasion in a kitchen with their mom's casserole behind them. And that's just the nature of where we're going to be. And I hope we're adaptable to those situations.
Well, we don't want to belabor your time, because a lot of you have been with us throughout the day. We are now at 5 o'clock. If there's any lasting comments or questions, I know that there's some stuff happening in the chat asking about universities, whether or not they're face-to-face or online only, just more information gathering. But we just want to, if there's anything lasting, give a few moments for that. Seeing none, we do want to thank all of our wonderful presenters here today. So Steve Johnson from Yaatly, Danny Cantrell from ForensicsTournament.net, and Ben Stewart from Speechwire for giving us all of your expertise and giving us lots to think about. And for everybody being here, like, we're very thankful, because if you weren't here, we really wouldn't have a webinar or a purpose on this day. So again, on behalf of Nassau Community College and Hofstra University, we're very thankful for all of you. And when the links are available, they will be available on our YouTube page. It's going to take a few days because I have to go through our university relations, but it will be up on our YouTube page soon. So thank you all and enjoy the rest of your Saturday.
Bye, everybody.